Hello friends, in today's episode we will look at growing the red potato as well as the white potato in large containers and we'll see some interesting results. So let's start with the red potatoes first. We are growing our potatoes from these cuttings that we took from an existing potato, and these are called the eyes of the potato. And what you need to do is dry them in the sun for about a day or two, not more than that. And what happens after that is that the back of the potato forms a nice hard covering and it helps prevent rotting when you plant the potatoes. Now we're going to plant our potatoes in this large container. It's like a whiskey barrel container, but it's longer, and you can get these at your local Costco if you have one. They're pretty cheap during the spring and the summers. Now what we're going to do is place these eyes of the potato inside this container, which has around 8 inches of soil. And the soil that we're using here is a mix of wood chips, perlite, compost, and chicken manure. Now in this case I'm using chicken manure, which is an organic fertilizer. We're going to water it after we plant it so that the eyes settle down and they will start sending roots pretty quickly. And what I do not recommend is growing potatoes in these 5-gallon buckets. Now I tried doing this and it was a disaster. The potatoes don't form very well in these 5-gallon containers. I mean, they're okay, but you really need a large container size to grow potatoes because they just need a lot of room to produce large potatoes when you're growing them. But in any case, we are using a similar kind of a soil mix, which is compost, perlite, and in this case, instead of wood chips, I just added some more sand and some more soil just to check how it goes. But in my opinion, most of the time you're going to get the best results by using a combination of wood chips, perlite, compost, and manure, as you're seeing here. I'm not adding any fertilizer here, and that's what I wanted to show you is how do potatoes grow with and without fertilizers. And what we are doing here is once the plants grow a little tall, about 6 to 8 inches from the beginning, you need to backfill the potato plants with some more planting material. And in this case, it's going to be wood chips, perlite, compost, and chicken manure. And you can see that we're just trying to fill the area around the plants. And I've seen some people asking me questions whether this technique is really helpful, does it work? And we'll find out. I'll show you when we harvest the potatoes that the potato actually forms the fruit or the potatoes along the sides. And here you can see we have added some more dry leaves. You can add compost. You can pretty much use any kind of medium to backfill your potato plants. Now when your potato plant looks like this, the leaves have dried a little bit, you're ready to harvest your potatoes. You can actually wait for about 4 to 6 weeks and leave the plant in that state so that the potatoes get larger. But in my case, I really needed these potatoes. I had to harvest them. So we went ahead and harvested these potatoes. But if you can wait, I would suggest you just leave the plant to die, let it become completely dry, and let the potatoes grow in the container for about 4 weeks or so, and then you can harvest them. Now I'm just removing the tops of these plants so that it's easier for me to harvest. And I'm going to remove all the leaves that I added on the top. And right away you can see the potatoes actually are formed at the surface and towards the top part of the container. Now if you do not backfill the container with the soil, you're going to end up with potatoes that are not really healthy. I mean, if these potatoes are exposed to the air, they'll become greenish and they're not really edible after that. So you need to make sure that you follow this technique. You start at a lower level and then keep backfilling your container with soil as the potato plant grows. So we're going to go ahead and harvest our red potatoes. Again, this is the container size. It's a pretty large container, and I recommend that you stick with at least this sized container or a whiskey barrel container when you're growing your potatoes. So we're going to just empty out the container and look at what harvest we have. And remember that we are not using any fertilizer. We're just using organic chicken manure and an inert medium, which is wood chips and perlite. And of course, the compost also helps. Not really a fertilizer, but it does supply a lot of organic material, conditions the soil, and is a must. So here you can see the potatoes. They look very nice. The potatoes are not like really big, and a lot of people have asked me questions as to why is your harvest less. People expected like pounds and pounds of potatoes. But let me tell you one thing. When you're growing at home, your aim is not to get like a bumper crop with a lot of heavy produce. What you need is good quality produce, and that's something that you can get by growing your own, by not using pesticides, and by making sure that you eat your produce quickly, not wait for it to come in a truck after months to your table. So here you can see the soil mix very clearly. It's a very high porosity, very fast draining mix, and this is the kind of mix that potato plants really love. And here is a harvest, not huge, but the potatoes are pretty nice. They're very delicious. And I'm not going to store these potatoes, so I'm going to wash them, make sure that I remove the dirt from these potatoes. And then what I'm going to do is just consume them within about 10 days or so. So again, these are the red potatoes which grew in the large container. Pretty good looking potatoes. They were grown in full sun. Potatoes do need full sun to grow. And here's what they look like once they're washed and they're ready to go onto your table. And red potatoes are very nutrition dense. They actually are better than white potatoes when it comes to nutrition. Very healthy, very delicious as well. Now let's look at growing white potatoes. We're growing the white potatoes in a similar size container. This is a whiskey barrel container. It's slightly wider, and we're using the same technique. After the plants emerge, we are backfilling the plant with some high porosity potting mix, and in this case again I'm using the same mix, the wood chips, perlite, but instead of adding manure, I do have some compost in there, but instead of adding manure, I'm going to be using an all-purpose fertilizer which is applied once every month, and we're going to see how that goes. We're going to see whether the potatoes grow well in that medium. Now a lot of people also recommend using something which is high in potassium and phosphorus, but I just think that you will do very well if you just add an all-purpose fertilizer. You can get water-soluble all-purpose fertilizers which we used here, and they should do a good job. You can add it every 6 weeks. You don't really have to add it every month. You just have to see how your plants grow. So I don't add fertilizer all the time. If my plants are growing really well, I might delay the fertilizer application to like 6 weeks. But if my plants are not growing that well and they need nutrition, then I'll go for each month. Now, whether to use organic fertilizers, slow release fertilizers, or salt-based fertilizers is something that you need to decide. There are a lot of options available. Once again, I'm going to mention that, if you don't want to use animal products, you're welcome to use salt-based fertilizers. They do a great job and it will help you grow the best plants, no matter what kind of fertilizer you're using. So as you can see here, these are the flowers on the potato plant. They look very pretty and overall health of the plant is very good. So instead of just using manure, by using some kind of an all-purpose fertilizer, you can use a slow-release fertilizer. You can also use a water-soluble fertilizer like I did here. You're going to get a really good crop at home. Now, I did not get any pests or diseases on my potato plant, but you can expect to get things like the potato beetle or worms, the caterpillars, or thrips. And for that, you can use neem oil. You can just spray with neem oil. You can spray the leaves, and that should prevent any kind of diseases that your potato plant should get. And I also did not get any viral diseases or fungal diseases on my potato plant. It grew pretty well. And once the leaves became less and less, I started harvesting the potatoes. And once again, you can wait a little longer than what you see here. The potato tops will actually completely dry out. Once again, you can see the potatoes forming on the top part of the plant, and this is why this technique where you plant the potatoes lower inside the container and then backfill the planting material is one of the best ways to grow your potatoes. And this really works. This technique works very well. So next time you try growing potatoes, do try it out. Instead of just planting your potatoes, plant them in a trench. If you're growing them in the ground or the raised bed, you can just dig a trench and then plant them. And then keep filling up the soil around the potatoes for at least about 16 inches or so. They need that much of space to grow and produce good potatoes. And size-wise, these potatoes are okay. Again, I could have waited for a bit longer, maybe around 4 weeks more, to get a better produce and to get a bigger sized harvest. But in any case, homegrown potatoes are one of the best potatoes you will ever eat. So do try it out. Whiskey barrel containers again are available very cheap during the spring and the summer season. And once again, I would recommend that if you have a local Costco, do go there, check it out. They might still have some in the store. And you should get some if you don't have whiskey barrel containers. These are great containers for growing plants. And here we have it. These are the potatoes after washing. They look very pretty. And it's a decent sized harvest. It's not a huge harvest. And once again, your aim should not be to get a big harvest or a huge harvest. Your aim should be to be able to get very good homegrown potatoes that you can use. They're going to be much better than the ones at the grocery store. They won't have any growth inhibitors sprayed on them. There is no pesticide residue on them. And that's what you want when you're growing your homegrown potatoes. So I hope you liked this video and you understood the difference between growing potatoes with and without fertilizers. Again, the first one was grown using organic chicken manure and compost. And the second one was grown using a salt-based fertilizer. And you saw the results. So I hope you liked this video. If you like to see more videos related to growing potatoes, do check out these two videos that you see on your screen, and we'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.